I remember this to this day. I'm like, this sounds weird. The tanks, the fuel tanks, granted it was running on diesel, so diesel doesn't explode like gas does, but the diesel tanks were like actually the sides of the vehicle. So they would protect the occupants. I'm like, that doesn't sound very safe to me. I don't care. Like it is fuel after all. It's combustible. Like I don't know how that's going to respond to, an RPG hitting it. And I'm going to sit on the other side of that thing. No, thank you. I'd rather be on skis, which was my role. My role was more to actually
be on skis.
Yeah, skis or by boot and just quietly move around behind it.
I thought that was just like a Swedish saying. I'd rather be on skis. Welcome back, folks. Today's guest is a mechanical engineer, an immigrant to the United States, and a veteran of Sweden's mandatory military service program. Please welcome Peter Hedstrom. So you're walking down into a cadaver what?
Cadaver Lab.
A cadaver lab.
Yeah, and we were gonna do some ear, nose, and throat stuff, so I knew that there was gonna be something along that line, right? But I walk into this room, and there's this long counter, stainless steel counter. I'd say about 20 feet long. And I just saw all these heads, cadaver heads, like they had been
just heads
separated from the body. And some of them had their eyes open halfway, and it's a scene from a what do you want to call it, like a Halloween sort of
horror
thing.
Movie or something.
And I just had to say, you know what? How many heads am I looking at, or how many heads are looking at me? And there was 17 heads.
Did you count, or did somebody have an answer?
No, I counted them, and then I had an ID tag, because what they do is that they actually, so these are people that donate their bodies to science.
Bless their hearts.
Yeah, so they have some of them have had unique medical conditions that they have some sort of abnormality that scientists or doctors are interested in looking at or cutting into or exploring, right? But these were more or less normal people, so they had all. But what they do is that if you donate your body to science, they decide what to do. Sometimes you can get a whole, complete, intact body, but most of the time they chop them up, and then they actually tag them so that after the scientific experiment is done, they reassemble your body. They send it out all over the country, right? So someone gets a leg, someone gets a knee, someone gets a shoulder, and then they have coordinators that make sure that these body parts come back together so you can have a proper funeral.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I had a friend that worked at a funeral home, and he was telling me about that they would put like PVC pipes and different things inside at the funeral home to make the body, because they would, like, if they take the bone out and bone marrow for a donation or something, they're now like compressed.
Sunken
you want
in.
to look, still somewhat human. So the amount of stuff they go through in that stage at the funeral home is really wild.
Yeah,
I open casket.
Yeah, I think that's a very American thing too, because I've been to one funeral over here, and I think three open caskets back in my home country. I saw my grandparents, and they looked they looked horrible. They were like really bad looking.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, my aunt was. I was like, oh my God. Yeah, I see it's her, but she looked like she had all like sunken in dark eyes and everything. Over here, they airbrush you and make you look pretty. But I'm like,
I wonder which one is better on the psyche.
I mean, I always had like, I shied back.
That's what my friends that do, like, they've done body recovery, they say the same. Like, the family doesn't, like, it's better to have them have a nice memory image than what it becomes. Because it's not them either, it's like your body and your soul are separate at that point.
Yeah, the thing is that when my grandmother died, I could tell she was dead. She didn't look alive. I knew she was dead. I was 6 years old. So but I didn't know, I had no concept of what a dead person would look like. But obviously, all the blood supply is gone, so your lips are gray or have a much different skin tone, right? But she looked very normal. She looked just like she was asleep, but with that color change. So I don't know. I mean, in some instances, I think it's probably better to see a somewhat prettier version of it, but I don't know.
Yeah. Sometimes the reality's
it's harsh.
reality.
Yeah. So, anyways, this lab, so I got this, had this tag, right, and this one doctor during the dinner, the night before, he's like, "Oh, do you want to? I have no one to work with. Do you want to be my lab partner?" I'm like, "Sure, why not?" So he told me, go and get the specimen. So I got this head of this big fat guy, like really heavy head.
So you could tell that he was fat.
Yeah,
because of his
just from
face
his
and
because
everything?
he had a very large head, and you can tell he's like. So most people
Are they
actually
on something, or is it in a
No,
bag?
no, they
like a
were
bowling-
just they were
bowling ball
just
bag?
they had a stand so that we could sort of they were attached somehow to a metal stand.
You mean a spike?
I don't know how they fixed this skull, but there was no neck really. I mean, there was a little bit of the neck, maybe the first vertebrae or something like that, and then the dude was just like built like he had some sort of condition, I think. I don't know if it was rigor mortis or what, but that usually it's lessens over time. But they keep these in the freezer too, right? So they could have been frozen tissue, but we had to like bend open his jaw so we could actually get in with our tools and do what we were gonna do a tonsillectomy, so basically remove the tonsils. It was just weird. I'm like, oh my god, this is so bizarre. But
Yeah. Do you feel that you like kind of like snap in and out of it?
yeah.
Like you get in the zone and you start working and stuff. And
Yeah, then you don't think
little
about it
voice in
anymore.
your head is like,
yeah, you don't
this
think
was a
about
guy.
it. Yeah, you don't think about it anymore. But anyways.
So you were in the. What were you doing for schooling, for education that brought you to the Cadaver Lab?
Oh, so I'm a mechanical engineer.
Okay.
And when I was out of school, I searched for jobs, and I got 3 jobs. It was back in 2000, and it was very difficult. No one wanted to hire someone with 0 experience. But then as 2001 came around, I had this was back in the day when companies still had ads in newspapers. So the Boston Globe had, I caught it in the classifieds. Sounds old school, but I guess it is. But they had all these ads, and I got actually 3 job interviews the same week, and I got 3 job offers the same week.
Whoa.
Yeah, and I'm like, wow, this is like too good to be true. One was for over in Lawrence, working on slurry pumps, basically industrial pumps that just pump stuff. Could be anything. One was for a semiconductor company in New Hampshire. Happy I didn't jump on that bandwagon because that crashed and burned pretty bad. A few years later, and then one was for a medical device company. They were looking for someone who could. What I studied in mechanical engineering was basically hydraulics.
Okay.
So I dealt with fluid calculations, all that crap, so that you can figure out pressure build-up, blah, RPMs on pumps, how they work, what to do, how to tune them, so on and so forth. So I ended up getting a job as a fluids engineer in a medical device company and started working on infusion pumps. And that's how I got down that path.
So you were studying hydraulic pumps, and then you ended up doing tonsillectomies? There's something.
Yeah, so it's an interesting transition, and I even strayed further away from that. My last job, prior to the one I have now, I worked for a genetic test company out in California.
You said genetic?
Yeah.
Genetic testing?
Yeah, so basically what they do is they had 3 divisions. They had one for women's health, they called, which is really prenatal. I don't know, do you have kids?
No.
Okay, so when you have kids, when I had my kids, my oldest daughter is 17 now. If you want to have a sample of the kids' sort of fluids, the only way to do that was to stick a needle into the womb and extract it from the fetus. And then you could see if you have various, genetic conditions, like do you have the right number of chromosomes? Do you have any abnormalities? Blah, blah, blah. Today, you can take a blood sample from a mother. And the risk with that is obviously you poke a needle in, you can injure the fetus. You can drive
it. Seems invasive.
Yeah. So you can actually take a blood sample from the mother, and in that blood sample, if she's pregnant, she's carrying the fetus genetic code too. And we have scientists today that can extract and separate it. So, and then they had a one for organ health, which was people that have failing organs or had donor organs. Because if you have a donor organ, it has a different DNA setup than you have. And then you can see if that organ is shedding DNA, and they have certain ways of telling, okay, this is bad. This means, you're about to reject the organ, or the organ is not feeling too good, and blah, blah, blah. And then we had one for oncology, which I think was the most interesting, actually, because understanding a lot of times when people get cancer today, you only see the very end part of the disease. The disease has been, like my dad had colon cancer that spread to his liver, and he was caught early on with his colon cancer. But they said that his tumor was growing so slowly that it probably been growing there for at least 10 years. And he was stage 1.
And he just, it wasn't common to get checked back then, right?
Well, so in Sweden, I guess they're cheap out a little bit. So over here, anyone, I think, from 45 to get a colonoscopy. Used to be 50, but they didn't do that in Sweden unless you had some sort of family history of something. He didn't have that. So he had never had a colonoscopy, and I don't know how he really came around finding out they had cancer, but what they can do now what my point is, so he found out stage 1 cancer, right? And he's fine now, although he got so much chemo that he got nerve damage from that. But anyways, so cancers, the precancer cells could have been in his body 20 years earlier or 15 years earlier, and we don't have means of detect or figuring out what they look like, right? So it's really cool that genetic tests today actually you can start picking these things out, and it's so early on that people really don't know what are the key proteins or signals that we need to look for. No idea. It's like looking out in the stars, on the star sky, and say, which star is what, right? There's so many freaking
Which
dots.
star is Cancer?
Yeah. So, like, which stars will you look for? Now we're starting to be able to separate stars from each other and say, okay, this star is that star is this, and also start putting, together patterns and say, oh, so if you have this genetic precondition, then you're predisposed to having, more prone to get these type of cancers. Some people, they live unhealthy lives for a long time and have no problems, while others live healthy lives and get deadly diseases. Makes no sense. But my point is, at some point when we understand this better, maybe 10, 15, 20, 50 years from now, we can start picking out, okay, these are the things to look for, and maybe we can also start developing drugs to actually suppress or eliminate cancer from developing. Period. Just, hey, you have a precondition for cancer. Take this drug, or maybe even better, some sort of injection of some stem cells or whatever, and then we will prevent you from getting at least some certain types of cancers that you are very likely to get. I mean, I don't know. Whatever.
Have you done any? Do you have any experience with stem cells?
No, none.
I don't either. No, I don't. No, I've just heard about it. It's very curious. I'm very curious at how they work. It seems interesting that they can kind of plug it into different parts of your body and it helps regenerate in those areas.
Yeah, I mean, I keep telling my dentist, because I have a rich dental history and thousands of dollars in my mouth. I can't wait for the day when you're unemployed, or no, not the day when you, instead of drilling and filling and pulling, yanking things out of people's mouths and put in like metal pieces instead, can start giving people like, oh, here I'm gonna treat your existing tooth by making it stronger in a natural way.
Interesting.
But that we're not there, right? And
I mean, the other problem is the for-profit side of it, right? There's no incentive to do things that way.
So how can he make money, right? And how can the industry make money? Some cynical people are saying that, and it's true, right? The cancer industry is a multi-billion-dollar annual, revenue generator. If you can treat cancer, then what are all those people going to do? And there's going to be people that make a lot of money today that will make no money then. I think that's cynical. I think that you can start paying for the pre-treatments or the scannings and all that stuff. It's a different skill set maybe.
Yeah, they'd find a way to make money from it.
But they'll make money from it, right? The doom and gloom of getting cancer is basically like if you can pay your way out of that and just get injections here and there and screenings, people are going to be all over it, including insurance companies. So
you were working for an oncology research company?
I worked for a company that actually takes the they produce the samples, and then the people, they have the service, so you could get it. Someone can come to your house and draw your blood. So a phlebotomist is what they call it, would come to your house, draw your sample, and then they would analyze it. And then the trick with that is, what are we looking for? Like I said, the night sky with all the stars. If you looked at every single genetic signal you get out of a sequencer, or basically a machine that separates out. So we have A, T, C, and G, which are the four components. If you've seen those DNA spirals, sometimes they get fancy. They say, oh, they have all these four components, and they have A, T, C, and G. I can't remember what they stand for, but they all build up the entire our entire DNA in different combinations, and they can only be paired certain ways. But whatever. You pull that out of a person's DNA, and it's so much information that it's like numbing. You don't know what to do with it. So what this company did, they basically had data analysis software that would go in, look at this, and start looking for patterns, start looking for certain combinations, and filter it, and then they can say, okay, so here's our summary of your DNA analysis. So that's what they were doing. And it's a huge industry, but...
Do you do any work now with AI? Or did the company you worked with then use it?
No. We barely have enough of real intelligence. So artificial intelligence is like, no, we don't. We talked about, actually, we had a conversation earlier this week where we said, hey, if our instruments were connected through the internet, and they could learn from each other, so we could have actual real machine learning, we could leverage that, and it could be sort of a data bank that all our users could access to, and their machines could say, hey, based on what you're trying to do and what I'm seeing that you're doing, the readings I'm getting for our sensors, here's a recommendation. But it takes a lot of money to invest in making that happen. And so AI is cool.
So prior to COVID, I was actually living in Vietnam.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. While I was in the Air Force, I got stationed over in Japan.
Uh-huh.
And so I traveled all over Asia from there. And then when I got out, I went back because it's just too fun.
Yeah.
And it's cheap.
We're in Vietnam.
I was in northern Vietnam in Hanoi.
Okay.
Have you been out there?
No. Well, I've been to Japan, and I've been to Indonesia, part of Indonesia. I spent 2 weeks in Bali.
Oh, I think you mentioned that. What did you do out there? Just vacation?
Taking it easy, yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's actually when my grad school, so long story short, we had So there was like this the hydraulic sort of society of Sweden has an annual fair.
Did you say the Hydraulic Society?
Yeah, like
Is that a
like
secret
companies.
society?
No, not really, but
Shadow government.
Yeah, anyone that builds or delivers to or depends on hydraulic equipment. And there's a lot of mining. Like, I don't know if you heard of Atlas Copco. It's a world renowned.
Yes, yeah,
You have Volvo, and you have Scania, which is a sister company sort of to Saab that builds trucks. And they all they have hydraulic front end loaders and things of that nature, and obviously transmissions are very hydraulic. So anyone that had to deal with anything hydraulic, they used to come to our university and try to pick people from the master's program to come and work for them. So this was sort of a way for companies to build.
CIA does that.
Yeah, to build relationships with potential new employees, right? So they sponsored this conference, and we were selling ads there, and without the profits from that, we did a tour to Japan, and I went to Hitachi, to their excavator facility where they build the world's largest excavator, which is like 3 or 4 stories tall.
Wow.
They had only the world's second largest excavator in production when we were there, because they don't have a production line. They build them on demand.
I see.
So I think they built like 6 or 8 or something like that. It's like a small number. But they had one of the world's second largest excavator was on actually they were doing sort of trials on it. So we got to see it. I don't think that was like 2.5. Yeah, it's like the equivalent of a 2.5 story building.
The excavator?
The height, yeah.
Wow.
Then the arm is even bigger.
What do they use those for?
So they use them
in
for
the
open
mines,
mine
right?
pitting.
Okay.
A lot of it is for smaller coal sort of excavations. Like you might have seen those enormous things from like in Germany, in Poland. I think they have these enormous shovel wheels, and I think they have them out west.
Oh
too.
yeah, they use them to pump oil, right? Or like extract oil from
the
ground.
No, they scoop up. So they have deposits of rich coal deposits, and then they just scoop them up on this big, huge wheel, and this thing is moving forward like 2 feet. I don't know, a minute or something like that. And then they just go back and forth for on a large area. And then they have dump trucks, very large dump trucks that come and take these big scoops, and they just keep it like a continuous, like a process. And but so that wasn't that, right? But these large excavators are usually used for something like that, or when they need to do some really serious digging. I mean, the bucket is like probably the size of this room.
Wow.
So you can just imagine.
Get down to the center of the earth really quick.
Yeah. Like scoop up your house in 2 scoops. But anyway, so we went there. So they paid. So we had spent a week in Japan, in Tokyo more precisely, with surrounding areas. And then we also had, so the amount of money we spent in Tokyo, in Japan for a week, we lived like kings in Bali for 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And had money left over. So
yeah, that's about right. So I tell people when they're going to Japan, or if they're interested in going, I say plan to spend, but do it because it's worth it. It's a unique experience, but it's expensive, like New York or LA or something.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that was crazy. I mean, I was there, so this is 25 years ago, and I think it's probably different now, but this is the first time I ever felt like a little child, because I couldn't speak with anyone. I couldn't understand what anyone said, and I couldn't read anything. I couldn't even write down what I wanted them to sort of point me out, because there was nothing in English. There was a couple of streets that were like main streets that had English signs here and there, but most of it was just Japanese signs. It was like, I'm like, I can't help myself. There was some people that knew English, right? But there was just very, very difficult. But it was cool, and they were so friendly.
I remember that sensation too when I got to the airport and I was by myself, and I'm just like looking. There's a bus that you take to get to the base.
Yeah.
So I'm like looking for some a military guy or a Western guy with a sign, and it's just all Japanese people around, and I'm like, oh yeah, no one can help me. And I try to ask, and people are like, oh no, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, it's real. I'm here. And
Yeah.
But it's a really amazing experience.
Yeah, we ended up going into Japanese typical restaurant, and we were hungry, and we were 11 Swedish guys. I'm not very tall. I'm like 5 foot, maybe 9.5, something like that. But I was like half head or a head taller than everybody else, and I had my hair color when I had hair was blondish. So we stood out like a sore thumb. And we walked into this restaurant, and the cool thing is a lot of Asian restaurants, they have like these plastic display things so you can sort of see what the food looks like on a plate, which is, I actually like it better than photographs or just reading.
They put a lot of effort into it too.
Yeah,
it looks exactly
they looked
like
really
hot
good.
Food.
Yeah. And so we were pointing at this stuff, and we were like, how do we ask what this is? Because, I mean, you can tell it's rice or some vegetables. And, yeah, carrots are, orange there as well as here. So we started doing, like, animal sounds, like moo, moo. Oh. And they were laughing. They were.
What's the time period? You said 2000?
This was in the... Yeah, late 90s.
Okay.
Early 2000s.
Yeah,
and
now it's all just phone.
Yeah.
That takes away from the fun, though. That's hilarious.
And we had so much fun. They were laughing. We were laughing. And they were like, yes. And they were like, yes, pig there. And we're like, oh, okay. So we were like, okay, we got 2 of those, 1 of that. Whatever that mystery thing is, we ordered that too. And we had a blast. And obviously McDonald's is there.
Oh, yeah.
Japanese McDonald's is a little bit different because they're catering to the local flavor, but a Big Mac was Big Mac.
I ate a lot of Western food while I was out there.
Yeah.
I'm a pretty picky eater.
Okay.
And the Japanese food, I like some of it, but most of it I wasn't the biggest fan of. So I knew where the McDonald's were. I knew where the pizza shops were, the burger places in Tokyo, which was also kind of fun because Japanese girls, they're like, they eat Japanese food every day, so like they wanted to have the Western food too. Yeah. So I'm like, hey, let's go try this American restaurant out.
Yeah.
We're at TGI Fridays getting buffalo chicken, macaroni and cheese.
Yeah,
just like, yes. I don't have to eat fish ramen.
I actually had so the last night in Tokyo was one of my wildest nights ever, I think. So that's back then the subway stopped running at 1 o'clock in the morning, I think, and we had a flight to catch to Bali at I think 6:30 was. I think boarding was around 6 or 6:30. So the subway started running again at 5 in the morning. So we were like coming up on midnight, and like there was this one guy and me. His name was Jim, and he was like, "Better, how are you feeling?" I'm like, "I'm good. How are you doing, Jim?" And he was like, "Well, I'm good." Like, what do we do when have you thought about what we're gonna do after like the subway stopped running? I mean, I said we could take a cab, but to me, I'm like, we're either in it or not. And and like, what are we gonna do? Go back half drunk to the hotel, try to sleep, and then catch, get on the subway at 5? Hell no. We're in Tokyo, man. I said, I will never come back to the city, at least not anytime soon. Let's just party it up.
Hell yeah.
And he was like, yeah. So we did that. And so we went to, we were a group of people, and we were like 4 or 5. Most of the other ones were like, oh, no, we're going to go home. We got to go back and sleep. I'm like, go ahead, sleep. I'm going to sleep on the flight to Bali. I'm not going to sleep. I mean, I get 3 or 4 hours of sleep in the hotel room, and I'm going to just be woozy. But no, that's not my kind of sleep. So we went to a couple of different, I can't remember the names of the party quarters of the city, but we got to one area, and it was like there were so many Germans, Dutch, Americans, and Swedish people. And like, we don't want to be here. Like, we came to Tokyo to meet with, to experience Japan, not some sort of westernized. So we said, screw this. We're going to this other party central that was sort of but we knew there was supposed to be the Japanese hung out. So we were the only two Westerners in this whole club, and or at least I had a Western appearance. And they were like, oh, look at those guys, they're different. And they were like asking, we talked to them, and they were like, we explained to them they were from Sweden, and they were like, oh, ABBA, Volvo. And they started playing on the club. I mean, the DJ found out that we were there. So he started playing the Dancing Queen with ABBA, and the bartender came out and like, and gave us free shots, and like, yeah, go ahead, you know. And they would like, we would dance. Both Jim and I were very sort of extroverted introverts, you know, engineering student geeks that have an ability to actually connect with people too.
Japanese will bring it out of you too. They're so fun.
And we had so much fun. You know, there were guys that there was like no jealousy. I mean, and we weren't there to pick up chicks or anything. So we were not like trying to get romantic with anyone. We were just there to have fun, just to party. And they were the same way, and we had so much fun. We spoke with some of them, and they had some English knowledge, but it doesn't matter. It's so loud anyways. But we had a blast, and we were drunk, really drunk, and so I told Jim, hey, whatever you do, you have to keep track of me. I can't find my way back to the airport. Because he was the one who, I know how to get there. I know all the stations. I'm like, okay, good. So I'm like, I'm going to rely on you. Like, I would want to tether myself to you, but I can't do that, obviously. And we got back to the airport, caught the plane, and had a bit of a moment on the airplane before it took off. But it's all good at the end of the day.
You mean like a bit of nausea?
Yeah, and the paper thin walls didn't do much to reveal what was going on in there, and people were looking at me afterwards, and I'm like, whatever. I had fun. I mean, we stunk probably like a bar, anyways. Like,
it's interesting. I mean, it was like that more so here before, but you could still smoke everywhere. That was the big thing. I was there from 2012 to 2016.
Yeah.
And you could smoke inside in a lot of places, and that was...
Yeah, they had... when I went to McDonald's there, actually, we tried McDonald's, there were people sitting in McDonald's smoking. I'm like,
smoking in McDonald's.
Wow.
I wonder what other countries you... Could you think in Sweden you could smoke in McDonald's?
Oh, no. Sweden is very anti-smoking. A lot of Northern European countries are like that. They ban smoking. Like, they're almost like they're banning smoking outside.
Have you been to Canada?
Yes.
Do you find it to be similar at all to Sweden?
Not as it from a tourist perspective.
Okay.
I think maybe as a citizen, because there's the free healthcare and all those things. Like when I grew up, I never had to worry about like, can I go to the doctor? Can my parents afford me to go to the doctor? Like, no, you go to the doctor. You hurt yourself, you go to the doctor. Like when I went to college, I did some stupid shit on a bicycle one time, and I sprained an ankle really bad. I partially torn my ligament. And
downhill?
No, I was just biking. I was actually biking to work on my motorcycle because I used to race motorcycles.
Oh, you're on a motorcycle?
No, I was on a regular bicycle.
Okay.
On my way to the garage where I had my motorcycle.
Oh.
So I
broke your foot?
I did a wheelie on my bicycle and fell so bad that I sort of sprained my ankle, and my whole foot was like filled with blood in the morning after, and I just went to the ER. I mean, there was no copay. I mean, maybe I spent like $5 or something like that just to. But it's like here, it's like you can be financially ruined.
Yeah.
And that same thing goes in Canada. I think they have the more of the Swedish system or the European system where you don't have to worry about stuff. So
that's how it should be. That's how.
Yeah, it should be.
Everybody
like that.
feels that way. I think universally around the whole world. Universal.
Yeah.
Healthcare.
So when I went here for grad school, I got a really bad sunburn. I had like blistering on my shoulders.
Sounds about Swedish.
Yeah, and
where were you?
on the Cape in April.
You're really sensitive to the sun then.
Oh yeah, I mean, we were out for a couple of maybe 4 hours or something, 3 hours in the sun, and it was bad. I was Mr. Red Lobster all day long for like a long time, and it was disgusting. But I went to get the blisters sort of taken care of and cleaned for like, I think it was 4 days, and this was in 2000. Yeah, 2000. Each visit cost my insurance company $125. And this is like, what, almost 5 years ago. So it's a lot of money. And they paid. The Swedish insurance was like, yep, you're covered, you know. But I said to myself, that's ridiculous. Like $125 just to clean up my shoulders and put some...
Yeah, it's just a big
gauze on them and
big money scam.
Yeah,
insurance and then government contracts.
That's I mean, one of these, like a water bottle. I mean, I think I don't know if you have a box of tissues, but there's a box of tissue in from a hospital supply room is like a $50 item.
Yeah, and whoever's supplying those is driving a Rolls Royce.
Yeah, and you go to Market Basket, you buy a 4-pack for like $5. It's the same thing. There's no difference. It is actually the exact same thing. Same brand, everything. Not Market Basket brand, but so it's like, why is it marked up to $50? And they charge you a full box. If it's ludicrous. I mean, I benefit from that by working in the medical device industry, but the cost of healthcare in this country is just ridiculous.
Yeah. Or hopefully we see some changes. I mean, everybody is aware of it at this point, and most younger people, I think everybody is really in agreement that it's what they want. So hopefully we just get the right people in place to make it happen. We'll see what the future holds.
Yeah. So anyways,
was it grad school? Go ahead. What you say? So anyways,
I was ask you about your Vietnam experience. So how long were you in Vietnam for?
I went to Vietnam several times. My very first trip, I went with Vietnamese people, which made it really cool.
Oh, that's cool.
When I was in Japan, I had a coworker who was Vietnamese American. His father came to the U.S.
Oh, okay.
And so he could speak the language. He had family there. And he was like, hey, since we're in Japan, I'm going to go to Vietnam.
Yeah.
Anybody that wants to come with me and my wife can.
Uh-huh.
And, like any kind of group trip at first is 10 people, and then 5, and then 3, and then it was just me and them. But we went and we explored the whole country. We started north in Hanoi, and we rented motorbikes, and we drove south, and we flew to Hue. We went to Hue and Da Nang, went to some like war history museums, went to some temples. And then I went down south to Ho Chi Minh City.
Yeah.
And I saw the actual, like, they call them the Cu Chi tunnels.
Yeah.
So, during the Vietnam War, they are like the tunnel rats is the name of the soldiers.
Yeah.
Went down underneath and actually hunted like the Viet Cong.
Yeah.
So I went through those tunnels.
Wow.
That was pretty wild. And just kind of explored, did the tourist thing.
How do they look upon? I mean, so do you speak Vietnamese?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No.
So that's actually interesting because obviously the enemy is almost the enemy, right? But it also becomes a generational thing. So once one generation dies off, but they can instill that image of the enemy, right? And say, hey, these are the bad guys. How are the Vietnamese people looking upon Americans?
They're pretty okay with us.
Yeah?
Yeah. They've been, so what's been told to me is that they've been occupied and at war forever, essentially. So it was like us, but then before us was the French. Before them was the Chinese.
Yeah.
So we're just kind of a blip on the radar in history.
Yeah.
But when I was in the north, they have an Independence Day, and they have an American B-52 plane. Like, it's a drawing, a photograph, like a image illustration. There's it's an illustration, but it's a B-52 broken in half on fire.
Yeah.
And it says, like, doesn't say, like, death to America, but it says, like, Happy Independence Day, Vietnam. So it's
celebrating.
It's still there isn't, I wouldn't say there's any, like, long-term animosity. You're not going to get attacked or feel any hate, but it is what it is.
Yeah. No, I think that's actually I experienced that once here, which was surprising to me. But so I had this. So I
was it because you were Swedish? Somebody had Swedish animosity.
Yes, and I was like, "Are you kidding me?" Yeah. But so I guess I'm a cheapskate. So I want to buy. I don't mind spending money, but I want to get something that I last. So, which sounds counterintuitive because I grew up with IKEA furniture, which is like doesn't last. But anyways, but it looks really cool, right? But if you want to buy the real stuff that is IKEA style, it's very expensive, right? Like from famous designers and stuff. But IKEA looks very similar, feels similar, but it doesn't last very long, and which is fine because it goes out of trend, and then you just toss it and buy new stuff. So I'm not into big. I want to have like good furniture. I ended up went and bought a whole bunch of cherry wood boards, and built my own bedroom set.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and it took me years, but it and I have it now, and it's cool to look at.
Lasting you forever.
Yeah, it's cool to look at it because I know I'm gonna pass these on to my kids. I'll never wear them out, right? So I bought a custom branding iron, so would I put the date, like the year that I made things. So I have stuff at home that's over 20 years ago that obviously my wife and I have used, but I didn't have a shop to begin with because I was in a one-bedroom apartment. So I ended up partnering with this guy at my then current job, and he's like, "Oh, I got a wood workshop. You can come and work it's really my dad's workshop. You can come and he won't mind." I'm like, "Okay, cool." So this guy was an old, he was in his early 70s, I think, and he was a World War II veteran. He had been part of he wasn't part of D-Day, but he came after that.
Mm-hmm.
So he was over in Europe, and he had when he found out that I was Swedish, he was like, "Fuck you! I don't want you in my shop."
Wow.
I said, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Well, you were supposed to be neutral, and you let the Germans pass through, and you did all this for the Germans, and blah, blah, blah." I'm like, "Dude, you're talking about my grandparents." I have no... My parents didn't even... They were born after the freaking war. It's not like I can do anything about that.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I didn't want to get into the nitpickiness because, he had a close...
You're not going to instigate an old
Yeah,
an
he
old war vet.
had a closed-minded perspective on things, right? And I said, well, yeah, the Swedish people let the Germans roll right through with their troop transports to Norway, but the Swedish, if you're into machining stuff, the SKF is like the world-renowned top-notch quality ball bearings. And ball bearings were a Swedish invention, actually. So they had the original recipe, and they were smuggling on torpedo boats, which are like power boats, essentially Navy's top power boats, overnight to England. They had like a regular delivery schedule across the North Sea with Swedish ball bearings to support the British war industry, and they had planes and boats and vehicles and all this stuff. But so the Swedish government was playing both sides. The fact of the matter is, when World War came around, the Swedish army was like, what do we do? No, there's a conflict. Okay. We can't do anything. We have nothing. We're not prepared. All right.
So the Swedish military was playing both sides in World War II. They're smuggling ball bearings to England,
British,
to the British.
Yeah.
And what were you said they were using it for torpedoes?
No, more for like their airplanes. And they had a lot of Spitfires that went into fire.
So how did Sweden invent the ball bearing? What was the issue, and how did they resolve it by packing balls into like?
I don't know what the reason that they did is probably because they needed to have more efficiency, right? Mm-hmm. As you started making things spun faster, like with the steam, with the industrial revolution, right? The original. I mean, from an engineering perspective, the original bearings were like, you have soft metals, or you have a softer metal that sort of will wear away, and then you just lubricate it with oil every now and then it'll last. Well, then expectations grew, right? You want higher RPM, so you can get more efficiency or higher speed. You want not have to maintain things or change things all the time. Like you probably know that, like old cars, if you got like 30,000 miles out of a car from in the 50s, it's like, wow, that's lasted a long time. Like people would not even consider buying a car today that would blow up after 60,000 miles.
Yeah, for sure.
Even though there are some cars that still do that, despite modern engineering. But so I don't know how it came about that they actually invented the ball bearing, but it's it's a revolutionary thing because once they that was out, I mean, it became world standard, right? Same thing with safety matches are actually a Swedish invention.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and there's
so the safety matches don't burn, right?
No, so safety matches
they have to burn. But
yeah, so
they
you
don't
know
do something.
You've probably seen these old school matches that you can strike it against anything.
Okay.
But safety matches are the ones you have to strike at a particular, the side of the box, right?
Is there an incentive in Sweden to invent things, or they just happen to be kind of smart thinking, efficient?
I think it was just how people were thinking. No, there's no incentive, and unfortunately, most Swedish inventions have walked out of the country, and the real capital investments have occurred elsewhere. And but there are some things that are like the inventor of the I guess it's called Tetra Pak, but originally it was like a pyramid-shaped cardboard-based thing with a plastic layer on the inside. You'll see that in anything you buy today, like dairy products, for example.
That's like a storage shape?
Yeah, exactly,
Okay.
a shipper or a container. That was also a Swedish invention.
These are really particular inventions.
Yeah,
That's
the
interesting.
zipper is a Swedish invention.
Okay.
Or I don't think it's actually the zipper as it's the way it is today. And then the fact that
Go ahead, sorry.
so you can lock it, right, so that it doesn't unzip by itself. So you have control of that.
So that was the Swedish edition.
Yeah, I think so.
They were like, we're gonna make this better.
Yeah. It's like we like the idea, but it's not working.
That's a Japanese mindset too. I've noticed that. Like that's like one of the really cool things in Tokyo. Everything was really efficient and clean and like modernized. It seemed like they were always trying to make things better.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they have in the last 30 years or so, Japanese thinking when it comes to production lines and how to set up a production line and how to run a production line in a factory is like changed everything. And I mean, American car industry, for example, had to deal with that.
Mm-hmm.
They had all these Japanese cars that came out that lasted twice as long as American cars.
Still
They
do.
didn't have the same engine output, but they were more fuel efficient. They came in the 70s from the oil crisis and stuff. It was a real competition. I mean, they were beating the shit out of American car manufacturers. They beat them on their own turf, and eventually they started setting up factories here, and then they started having to spill their secrets and say, hey, this is how we do it. We do quality control. We check this, we check that. We design with this in mind up front, and not just deal with quality control as an afterthought. It's a complete different mindset.
Absolutely.
And it has changed everything on a global scale. So
You came to the U.S. from Sweden for school?
yes, I got a stipend, so I was given an opportunity to study at Worcester Polytechnic Institute for a year. I had to finish 6 months worth of grad school work to get my certificate or diploma, whatever you want to call it in Sweden. So that's what I was shopping around for. But then a professor at my university in Sweden was like, I have this, I know this professor in the U.S. who's looking for students who can do some work for him, and it'll be like your final project, and you'll get your degree after that. I'm like, okay, well, let's see what's in it for me and what they offer us. And so it turns out they were going to pay me, not a fat salary, but it was decent. It was like $1,200 a month. And 25 years ago, it wasn't bad. I mean, and then they ended up actually setting up housing for us. that I spent like $200 a month for housing, including heat, and laundry facilities. So I'm like, I have $1,000 to pay for food and anything I want to do every month. I'm like, I'm gonna be locked up in a school. I'm not gonna spend no money. Eventually, I did spend a lot of the money on my then girlfriend, now wife, but
so it was worth it.
Absolutely. So, but then it was going to take a little bit longer. They said, you know what, you can go to, you can stay. It'll take like at least 10 months, maybe 12. First they want us to stay for 2 years. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I have 6 months worth of work that I need to do. I'm not going to sign up for 2 years, because that was their grad school program. Like, so they actually went through my curriculum. They had, all the stuff they have done. And then, oh, this is like postgraduate work. This is grad school. There was a lot of postgrad work. So first year in college here is what we do last year in high school. So anyways, long story short, got interested in that. And we were 3 kids, so we were all said, okay. And we knew each other. So we're like, we can go over there and do this. It sounds like fun. And then we got free courses. We can take whatever class we want, but I'm like, we gotta be busy. So I took some classes. But
So your wife is also Swedish?
no, she's quarter Swedish.
Okay, but
She's
you met her in Worcester.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Drunk
That's what
in
it
a drunken stupor, I found her in a local bar, and it was just interesting that it happened. But whatever.
Classic love story.
Yeah.
So how old were you when that happened? When you came to the U.S.?
25.
You were 25, and what year does mandatory service start in Sweden?
You have to go into a recruitment center and get sort of tested when you're 17, between 17 and 18, like the last year of high school.
Okay, so do they send everybody together, or is it like a lottery, or how do they?
Yeah, they send everyone. So, I mean, I think they are regional recruitment centers, right?
Okay.
Just like here. And I think not all, but some of my classmates actually went in the same time. It's sort of, but they don't take everyone from the same school at the same time. But
I see.
But they were, within a short period of time, most people had, like maybe over a 4-week window, everyone that was a boy had to go and to wherever they and it depended on if you wanted to do certain types of if you wanted to do like a paratrooper, for example, which is like, then they would have to go to that recruitment office, because they don't have paratroop recruitment in all recruitment offices.
So everybody, all able-bodied males, have to sign up. And then, what are the different services that are like? Do you get to decide, or like, is there?
So you can make a choice. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to do something, because I said, I don't know if I'm gonna go for college. Like, I don't know what I want to study. I knew that I would probably want to study engineering, but I'm like, I didn't really have the motivation to really suck that up. And I didn't have the self-confidence to say, I think I can do this, because it's a very demanding sort of program. So I was very open to the idea of doing some time in the army. I wanted to come out with some new skills, and I knew one thing I'd like to do. It was baking and cooking. So I said, I could be. I learned. I like to do some cooking. I could do cooking. And that was so funny, because there was 2 days of testing, and
I'm sorry, but what year was this? Like around when you graduated?
So that must have been 89.
Okay.
Something like that. Yeah. And so the last step is to go in and talk to this recruitment officer or whatever he is, and where they assign you. And I think you have a bit of a choice there, because he said, oh, you saw your paperwork. That's usually
you take a test as well, right?
Yeah. There's physical activities. There's a lot of the mental evaluation. There's obviously vision, hearing, all of the senses, right? They want to make sure they know what.
Did they make you duck walk?
No. But a lot of this actually mental tests. Figure out how do you respond in certain situations, how are your problem solving skills, how is your logical thinking, what are your communication abilities, and so on. And I said, so he said, oh yeah, I see you want to become want to work in the canteen, and you could see yourself do that. I'm like, yeah, I mean, that would work for me. He said, it was like, no, you're completely off target. We don't use people like you for that. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? He said, oh, he told me you scored really high, like almost top on everything. And he said, oh, we do more with people like you. He said, I can't force you to it, but I would recommend that you sign up for, here's what I would like to do. At the minimum, I think the absolute minimum was like 6 months. And then you become what we call like gun fodder. You basically become an infantryman that knows how to dig a hole, fill the hole, dig the hole again, run from one hole to another hole, shoot with a rifle. Maybe you can pick up an RPG, but you really have no special skills. You're just like a disposable piece of human body that can do a lot of damage, obviously.
Yes.
But you don't have any extra communication or education. So he said. So he basically said, we'd like to make you like what they call a cadet, which is essentially you become an officer when you're in while you're in, but also as you graduate and you leave, you then become assigned to become an officer. Not I can't remember what they call it, an NCO.
Commission, commission and non-commission. So
we would not make any money off of it, but we would be sort of, and you could, as that, also become what they call a reserve officer. So I said, okay, cool. I mean, I said, what does that mean? And he said, well, it's a minimum of 12 months of education. But he said, I would actually like to sign you up for the that's the only thing that they can force you to do. But it's also, he said, we don't want people that are not interested in this to pursue this. So we recommend it. If you don't want to do it, that's fine. But he said, I'd like you to do the sort of the advanced course of this. So I'm like, okay, sign me up. I said, I have nothing better to do.
A mandatory service is 2 years?
No. Like I said, minimum is 6 months.
Oh, it's okay. I was curious
but
about that.
But I ended up doing like 16 months or something like that.
Interesting. So it's only, I didn't realize it was such a short period of time.
Yeah.
So what, okay. Now, all right, I'm picking up what you said now. Okay, so your minimum time you could do is 6 months, but you would just be like an infantryman.
Yeah.
But if you were interested in doing more time, then you could be in a more advanced place.
And they can,
your skills put you in that situation.
And they can only force you into they can only conscript you into a 12-month duration. Anything over 12 months, at that point, you had to volunteer for or accept. So I said, I got nothing better to do. Sign me up. And it was probably one of the best things I've done. It was really fun. I got to go through things that a civilian never would do. Like I have gone without food for a week. I have, dealt with not sleeping for the better part of a week. I dealt with or got educated in demolition training, all kinds of, weapon systems, got to drive all kinds of cool vehicles because, that was sort of my role. That's that you need to be able to take on a lot of different hats.
What was your favorite thing to drive?
So we got to drive this, it's like an infantry vehicle with like what do you call them? Like a tracked.
Okay.
Yeah, that was cool because you could do like the tank turn and stuff.
Yeah, 0 degree turn.
Yeah, and that was cool. And then we had another vehicle that was like you could drive up on like 7 feet of snow, and that had like really wide tracks, and you could get up like steep inclines. They had actually a funny design. They had like 2 cabins, and they had hydraulics that connected the two, and then they had their own independent. Well, I think that was actually. Yeah, I think they had their own independent engines, and then they would sort of had they're really powerful actually, and they could climb up steep inclines, like 45-degree inclines. It was like, whoa, is this thing gonna turn over? And it could drive on swamplands, marshlands without like sinking through. And if it would, it could float. And it was a really cool vehicle.
That's really impressive.
Yeah.
Is that where you found your love for hydraulic pressure?
No, not at all. Not at all. The thing though it was made out of fiberglass, so it wasn't bulletproof.
Oh, okay.
So it was just for sort of peaceful
Yeah, that sounds about right.
transport. But then we drove some that were actually some of the Russian-made vehicle. I actually see them in Ukraine right now on some of the footage. I'm like, that looks like an MTLB.
I signed the inside of that thing.
Yeah, and I know what that is like. That's like you fix that with a sledgehammer or something breaks, but it's also a tremendously useful, but also in the modern old vehicle, right? It's like that thing goes up like I remember this to this day. I'm like this sounds weird. The tanks. The fuel tanks, granted it was running on diesel, so diesel doesn't explode like gas does, but the diesel tanks were like actually the sides of the vehicle. So they would protect the occupants. I'm like, that doesn't sound very safe to me. I don't care. Like it is fuel after all. It's combustible. Like I don't know how that's going to respond to an RPG hitting it, and I'm gonna sit on the other side of that thing. No, thank you. I'd rather be on skis, which was my role. My role was more to actually
be on skis.
Yeah, skis or by boot, and just quietly move around behind it.
I thought that was just like a Swedish thing. I'd rather be on skis.
Yeah, no. We actually had a vehicle. We had a six-wheeled six-wheel drive vehicle. That was our sort of group vehicle, but we only drove that somewhere, and then we parked it, camoed it, and didn't see it for the rest of the usually what we did. And we get back to it a week or two later and drove off.
So everyone that goes through mandatory service, whether it's for 6 months or can you do a career?
Yes, you can.
Okay,
you can actually, if you want to, after you've done your 12 or 15 month or 16 or 18 month, if you're in the Navy, excuse me, mandatory service, you can actually apply to get into a sort of a become a professional officer. I didn't. That wasn't for me. I'm like, after I was done with my 16 months, I'm like, you know what, this was fun, but nah.
Yeah, it's good to see through beyond.
Yeah, and that was when I got the motivation to actually go to grad school and become an engineer.
So everybody that goes through has to go to a boot camp, right? So you go through a military process where they do the medical and mental, physical, everything, and then you go to boot camp where you get put into groups, and you go sleep in bunk beds, and you gotta. So what was that experience like for you?
That was interesting because we were a smaller group of recruits that came in at a very particular time, and the ones at our regiment or our base that had been there for the better part of 15 months or 16 months, they were the ones who sort of what do you call it? They hazed us, right? And we were like 28 guys, I think, something like that. So we were, a small part of the whole crew that was on this base. So we got a lot of attention and a lot of focus on us. All the officers were all over us, like, "Oh, you got to do this, you got to do blah, blah, blah." And they wanted to really drill us on all the, like stupid things we thought was stupid, right? But you realize afterwards, like, oh, so all the cleaning was actually not for the sake of cleaning. It was to build,
attention to
detail, take orders, respect your officers, build group sort of cohesion in all that. Those were the real values of the exercises that were, needless if we were out in the middle of the, night digging a hole or running or doing whatever. that was the whole purpose, right? And the cleaning was just an additional thing, and all this stuff. Tomorrow at 0600, all this stuff need to be done. And like we got our uniform and they had this hand embroidered or hand stitched on all our patches, and like, what the fuck? I mean,
yeah.
Does anyone have a needle? So there was to build that camaraderie, right? And some people fell out of it, and we had actually we had 3 females that joined us on the first day.
So they get to volunteer. So it's mandatory for men.
Yeah, exactly. They volunteer, and they can. The difference between them and us was that they could drop out whenever they want with no consequence. We can drop out too from cadet school, but there would be consequences, and it would be the worst possible consequence would be that you go to jail. But it could also be that you're being sort of demoted to a less demanding position with less educational expectations and so on. But so we had one chick, she bailed the first day because she's like, okay, this is going to be not what I anticipated. One chick bailed after a month, and she said, this was interesting, but it's not really what I expected. And the third one, she actually became a professional officer. So she hung through the whole thing, and they,
Nice.
and that was really interesting. She was very petite. She couldn't handle all the physical carrying heavy things, right, or lifting things or reach things, but she had other qualities that helped her be successful as a team member. So those were really growth sort of moments for me, and obviously for her and for the team. But yeah, that's and then they aborted that or abolished that whole model of mandatory service. But they had actually recently reintroduced it.
So there was a period of time where there was no mandatory service in
Yep.
Spain. Sweden.
Yeah.
So what you said that you could potentially go to jail. So like, what is the repercussion if you're like, no, I'm not gonna. If you don't even step foot, you don't sign paper, you don't even step foot in.
Yeah, exactly. If you refuse, you'll get a court date, and then you'll be sentenced to X months in jail.
So would they put you in like longer than if you were doing mandatory service? So it's not an equitable like a trade-off?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, I don't know anyone. I mean, the bailout that people often did was that, out of the 100, if there was 100 kids that came in, they didn't only had a budget to handle 25 to 30%.
Okay.
The rest sort of were getting what they call a free slip, so they can just, and it was easy to get that. You could say, I got asthma.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And they wouldn't prove it to me, or you could say, oh, I got a sore knee. Oh, I got a bad back. 20 years before, like when my dad did his service, that would not work. You would get, like I told you how World War I, they had no preparedness in the Swedish army, and World War II was never going to happen. So they were surprised by World War II coming around. So, but in the 60s, because of this mentality, like, oh, there could be another conflict, especially as they saw what the Soviet Union grew into and the Eastern Bloc, Sweden's army was like top of the line. Like, we didn't have a lot of people, but we had top of the line equipment.
Nice.
And they pursued that up into the 80s when they said, you know what, this seems to be stable, but it's not really great. And then the NATO had grown into, a powerful organization that we weren't part of, which we are part of now, thanks to Putin. And his most recent
conquest.
Yeah. But so dear Vladimir pushed us into actually taking sides. But Sweden was always very NATO friendly. And NATO coordinated a lot of things with NATO countries. Like Norway, that we share a long border with, were a NATO member. So we knew that Sweden would probably be the battlefield if there was a battleground, if there was a conflict, because the Russians would want to fight somewhere else than on their home turf, and the Norwegians or NATO wouldn't want to. They want to go somewhere else. So Sweden is right in between. Perfect. And it's a strategic conquest. Like if you can take Sweden, then you have a lot of Baltic Sea control.
Mm-hmm.
But so they ramped up, but then as the Soviet Union fell apart, I don't know how old are you, Jake?
32.
So that means you were born in
92.
Okay, so you never experienced when the Berlin Wall
Nope.
fell, and that was like mind blowing. So 89, I was what 16 years old, and we watched TV, and you saw, the Berlin Wall was something was well known, like that there was East Berlin and West Berlin, and people lived on. Okay, each side they couldn't cross. I mean, there was border crossings, but they were minefields in between that would and there were guards that would shoot you to death if you try to. So when that wall fell down, there was like, wow, this is some major changes. As the Soviet Union disappeared on the map as a threat, it was kind of interesting because, like, what do we train to protect ourselves from? We never were trained to attack, right? We're always just defensive warfare, like guerrilla warfare. How do you ambush? How do you delay? How do you demoralize your enemy? But not how you conquer them, because we were always going to be the underdog.
Mm-hmm.
But then that disappeared, and that's when the budget funds for military expenditures sort of dwindled into nothing. So it was easy to get out of it. But I do know some people that requested what they call the weapon-free service. So basically they would do something else then.
I see.
And they were actually part of our. They did not like the idea of having to kill people.
Mm.
I mean, I don't think anyone liked that, but it's just someone's got to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, some people are willing to accept that it's part of the preservation.
I was very uncomfortable the first time I went to target shooting, and I looked at full figure, half figure, and quarter figure targets, and they were people.
Mm.
I'm like, this is fucked up.
What is the primary rifle do you guys use?
It's back then was what they called an AK-4, which is not an M16.
Mm-hmm.
It is a license. It's built by Bofors, which is a Swedish company that build howitzers, anything from howitzers to advanced target seeking, whatever stuff, and rifles. And there was I think this is a licensed version of some sort of Swiss thing, whatever. But it's called AK-4. I don't know what it is and it's not has nothing to do, no similarities to the Kalashnikovs or AK-47s. But it's an automatic carbine. That's what AK stands for. So it's an automatic rifle, but can shoot individual rounds or bursts of I mean, you can empty the whole. And it's 5.56 ammunition.
Oh, okay, so you're using like a NATO round?
Regular NATO rounds. And the other, the predecessor, no, AK-5 is what we had. AK-4 is the predecessor. AK-4 used the 7.62, also NATO ammunition. And I think that magazine only held like 20 rounds, while the 5.56 was like 30 rounds. But you can empty it just
real quick.
Yeah.
So what was your experience with the demolition? You said did you blow up like for your training? What kind of stuff did you blow up?
So we used TNT, obviously a C4, and we had also the I don't know what the name for the was, but it's like a line you can with a I think it's a TNT line that you can sort of wrap. So we used them for two things: take down trees, wrap it over a couple of rounds around the tree, put a fuse on, go back, and then it would blow off the tree.
I feel like they used it in Vietnam. I'm trying to think of the name.
And we also used them to clear, like when we did set up ambushes, we would line the ditches on separate fuses. So if the enemy would jump off to the left or to the right or the both, we could get them out of one ditch or both, and we could also control it. And this, I think the burn rate was like something crazy, like over like 1,500 yards per second or something like that. So it's like poof, it goes quick. And you lay out a couple of, so you have a couple of backups so you can do more than one time, because I think that actually it itself, you can shoot at it, you can a round won't set it off, and if you have one lying next to the other, it won't burn unless you have a fuse that actually triggers it.
Oh, wow.
So obviously you could damage it, right? But we used to put them apart a little bit so that one would blow off the other one, but then you could clear the ditches when people come up, and
That's some good engineering.
Yeah, get back into the line of sight so we can take them out with.
So, when they brought back mandatory service, it's there now, right?
It is now, and I actually talked to my sister, her oldest daughter, who's 18 now. She's actually going to go into the service.
Oh, cool.
And she's going to do a non-weapon. I think she's going to be a helicopter something, basically airborne medic. Be on a helicopter crew and go to rest. Yeah, go to. I mean, and you know, from a civil perspective, it could be that she gets civil duty and go to real accident sites, like, you know, pile-ups
for sure,
and help out with that. But she won't be having to need to do weapons training and all that stuff. So, and I can see that's it's a line to cross, right? To learn how to use a weapon.
Yeah, and to force somebody to do it.
Yeah,
is also, you get starting to turn into like a warmonger or something.
Yeah. Oh, it's also important, right? So Sweden has a very strong fear of the Russians for natural reasons, but we also have a very strong militia culture. So I knew several kids in my school when I was a kid. Their parents or grandparents were part of the militia, so they actually had an automatic rifle at home, you know, behind lock and locked up, and they would go out and train annually or so.
Now that's a legal thing, right?
It's
organized.
Yeah,
because it's something we hear about in the States is that there's mandatory service in Sweden and that they get to take their rifles home. Now I knew that was more of like a myth with some truth behind it than it was the actual fact, but that's what you hear in the States. Yeah,
so they have a I think they had basic radio communication devices. I mean, in this day and age, I think that's all junk, right? Because everyone has a cell phone, and a cell phone is just, you know, can be listened by anyone, but even and can be tracked easily. But they had basic, they had training, right? Military training, and they had drills. They had local weapon depots. They're hidden from. I mean, they're in plain sight, but they're hidden from. They doesn't say weapon depot on it. You know, it's like usually like one red barn of many, many, many red barns, and it looks like, okay, I mean, if they were gonna go after every single red barn, the enemy would never be able to cover any ground. So it's camouflage into the landscape.
It's very smart.
It is smart. And it's very. It can then be.
Who was it that came up with? Is there a president in Sweden, or is it like a continuous leader? Or?
We have a prime minister that's being elected every 4 years, so like here.
And they stay kind of on board with that path, like
and it doesn't matter if you're left or right wing. They typically they are usually the right wings are more eager to support the finances to support the army or navy and air force. But everyone, and in this day and age, when you have Putin on the other side of the a little stretch of water, there's a lot of focus on, you know, what's going on over there, what can happen to us here.
Yeah, and there's no signs of anything slowing down either. That's the other alarming aspect of all this.
No, and that's scary. I mean, I talked to my parents, and you know, they see things that could be considered flukes, but could also be, you know, what they call propaganda warfare, like basically non-military things, like, hey, my bank, I can't log into my bank. What's going on? And then it's like, or my text message, like I got a weird text message, like doesn't seem to be working as usual, or my internet connection is shaky or was down for a few minutes. Like, what's going on? Well, a lot of times that's how an enemy will poke at you, like what they call gray warfare tactics, right? They want to find out where the weaknesses are. Why did a part of the country lose power for absolutely no particular reason? Well, was it a mistake or a faulty equipment, or was it something inexplicable? Shit like that happens, right? I mean, I don't know. This is obviously before your days, but you should check out U-137. Google that. And that was a U-boat or a submarine that was deep into Swedish territory in the 80s that they ran up on ground, which was a Russian submarine that was obviously spying, and the Swedish Coast Guard had to come and tow them off.
What did they do with the Russians?
They brought them in for examination, and talked to them, said, what are you doing here? Why were you here? And obviously they're not, we are not telling you anything. We are here, we mistook, I mean, you can't say we misnavigated into this archipelago. No. But they would tight.
What are all these documents?
Yeah, like, so they obviously confiscated anything that they had any sort of communications or potential orders that they had on board. But, that's just one that was caught red-handed.
Yeah, it's never ending. It's going on every day, all day long.
Yeah. So those are things that are now, people in Sweden are obviously like, what the hell is going on? What's coming next? Like, what is the next thing going to be?
Hopefully nothing.
Hopefully nothing.
We'll see.
Someone, I think in Ukraine, said that World War III has started, and the Ukraine is just, this conflict is the spark, and it will just grow from here. I don't know how true that is. I mean, one could say that to draw attention, and obviously they want to do that because they want to calm things down and button things up. But I mean, look at this. They are mercenaries from all over the world on the Russian side, right? They're from and also on the Ukraine side.
There's a whole like foreign legion fighting over there.
Yeah, and they have and now the North Koreans are there, not in great numbers, but it's just a matter of time, perhaps. So I don't know. I want to be optimistic and say it's going to come to an end, but I don't know what that end is going to look like.
I don't either. So
Trump, I don't think is going to be able to wrap this up in 24 hours. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone can wrap that up in 24 hours.
No, there's not a chance. But he's definitely more willing to do things in a like non-traditional way.
Yeah, so and I think that, and I think, so I don't want to get too political here because I don't think that this is your intent with this podcast, but I think Trump says a lot of stuff to please the audience, while he in reality say something very different. I heard some recordings from him when he talked about how the Germans were, inviting, because the Germans are the ones that have had a lot of really tight knit sort of dependencies on the Russians and for their gas and electricity supplies. And he had said some stuff that this is like a really bad move that you're doing. You're basically becoming dependent and becoming Russians. The Russians you'll dance to their pipe, right? And he said it in terms of like, I heard this recorded interview. I'm like, Trump said that? That makes a lot of sense. Like that's a very different Trump than the showman that we've seen on the on the campaign here, right? The showman is necessary to gain people's attention and approval, but I think he's a smart guy. He says one thing to please the masses, and to rile up the masses and be the non-traditional alternative. But then I think he has actually some real negotiating skills. Although I think he's like everyone. Everyone has their fuck ups. Everyone has their strengths. So he's that. It's just that when you're a president or president candidate, you're gonna be scrutinized to the point that it's
Absolutely.
can't get away from it.
Do you feel that mandatory service would be a benefit in the United States?
Absolutely. I think that kids learn to take orders. They learn how to work together, and they learn how to work under pressure.
Work under pressure is a big one.
Yeah, and also learn how to prioritize. Like if you have 5 things that need to be done between now and 6 a.m., and you only have time to do 3, like even with the best drill team, I mean, and many times if if you don't have a good cohesive team, you only get 2 things done. But what are the things you should focus on? And then also, it allows people to take on leadership roles or understand what leadership really is. It is not to just tell someone to do something. It's to find a way of how to accomplish something together. Not, that is something that, I think a lot of people starting to get their eyes up and realize that the Army or the Navy or the Air Force, you don't have people just scream orders and point at, with a whole hand and say, do this or do that. No, they have limited resources. They have challenges. You got to solve those things live, right? And figure out how that's real leadership.
Yeah, in real time.
Yeah. So I think that it's something that people benefit from.
I agree. I feel like it would be interesting. Do you know of any? I know South Korea and Israel have mandatory service. But do you know of any country that has where it isn't necessarily all military? Like I thought, America's so big. If we had if you could decide whether you want to go civil or medical or military, I think that would be kind of a neat concept.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that the so I know actually I work for a company that has an Israeli branch. So I know that they have mandatory service there, and they actually go to war. I mean, they have had so many infected situations in that country that if you sign up, you get pulled in, and that's for men and women. You're doomed to go in. You're gonna see fighting. You're gonna be on a perhaps not necessarily guaranteed, but you're gonna be in a conflict. At some point, you either when you do your service or when you become called in later on. But yeah, I mean, I think that the uniqueness of the Army is obviously the killing aspect, right? That you deal with weapons and you have an expectation that this role might end up you're going to be forced to either
kill or die,
or be killed, and you're gonna be put into situations that are life or death situations. That makes things so much more real and much more demanding than if you go into, let's say, a civil engineering project. We're gonna build a road here. I mean, that's part of military, right? So. But I see what you're saying, that you could do civic duty, but I think that leadership aspect, I mean, I guess, yeah, I mean, like, for example, disaster relief or disaster support is the same thing. Life or death. It's not that you're going to go and kill people, but if you don't do the right thing, people will die because you didn't do it right. But no one's going to come after you and try to kill you, right? That's a big difference. But
Mother Nature.
Yeah, exactly. Mother Nature will kill you, and that can be the worst enemy ever. But I think that could be good. I mean, I think that I think the real thing is not the killing aspect; it's the teamwork.
It's the teamwork.
The teamwork thing.
The camaraderie, the teamwork, the group think, the challenge.
Yeah. Too many people today, I think, are very self-centered. I don't know. They have all these labels on different generations, and some way and some a certain way. I think that's maybe true, but I think the people in general, even people that are of my generation, are very sort of egocentric. They just think about themselves. They don't know necessarily what it takes to work, to collaborate, to make compromises. Say, you know what, I give up some of my wants to make your wants become true, but we got to find a middle ground somewhere, or find a way to justify why one is more important than the other. That is beyond my will or my wish. That's hard to do. It's something that you got to certain situation, like you never see that level of need to resolve those kind of conflicts at a job, at a workplace. You just switch job, or someone gets fired, or someone gets just run over, right? But in those situations that you are in the army, or maybe a disaster relief, or there's external pressure that you really can't do anything about, you have to come to terms with this and really resolve it.
Yeah, you all have to work together and see each other again the next day. Ultimately.
Yeah,
So.
and even in sometimes you never see each other, and you never say goodbye, so you're living together.
Yeah.
Which is like, that puts a lot of stress on and builds. We actually had conflict resolution as a part of leadership training, where we were put in a in a long house out in the middle of the woods for a week, and then they didn't even have to. So we had training people there, or I guess you maybe call them counselors or something like that. People who were sort of into this stuff, and they didn't even have to seed the conflicts. They happened by themselves. And then they took those conflicts into the training and said, we're going to solve this. This is what you need to do. The first thing you need to do is learn how to listen. Not hearing, because we can all hear, but listen with intent. And you have to also speak with intent, and speak without intent to harm, but rather to solve a conflict. And that was really...
That's impressive.
It was really wow, I had never thought of this before I got into this line of sort of training. But that was real shit. I mean, and there was no way we could get out of that. We were there for a week, locked up. We could walk around the building, but we were miles and miles away from anything else. And we had to resolve all those things. And that was really cool. I mean, we learned how to say, you know what, I'm going to keep my peace. I'm going to listen. And then I'm going to reflect. And then I'm going to respond. And if my response need to come 10 minutes after or an hour later, so be it. But
especially to learn that at a young age too is really impressive.
Yeah, when people have all this, hormones, boiling over, you're in your late teens, early 20s, and also boys have,
Yeah, I don't remember any training like that. There was no.
You never had that?
No, we didn't really have any conflict resolution.
Yeah, no, we were trained in that, and it was very helpful.
I believe it. Yeah, it's impressive
because
it's
in my
all
personal
conflict.
life. Yeah, I don't know how many times I told my wife, listen, all you need to do is be quiet and listen.
You said that to your wife?
Yeah, and I said, you're gonna get your time to speak, but right now you are responding to me in an emotional way, which I said I understand, but it's not a productive way for us to communicate. And she's like, when she cooled off,
you disarmed her.
when she cooled off, right? She's like, you know what? That's right. I was just fighting back because I just want to fight back. I said, yes. I said, I this is not effective. This is not a productive way to have a relationship. I said, you have to say, I'm gonna listen. And it's not going to be that only I speak or only you speak. We will all both speak, but we need to listen to each other. And we need to communicate in a way that is not intent to harm the other one and say, I'm going to get revenge on you. No, it will have to be in a way that we're trying to resolve this situation, get to the bottom with it. And it actually works. I mean, obviously, I might sound like I'm asking my wife to be quiet, and
no, it was just a joke. I mean, it sounded like first, but what you're saying is yeah.
But it's to bring it to an evenness, right? Where you say, this is you're not more important than I am, and I'm not more important than you.
Mm.
But we have to give each other an opportunity to talk in peace. Because if we don't, we'll never have results. We'll just yap at each other, and nothing good will come out of it.
It's true. Do you feel like have any other? Do you feel that you have any other long-term benefits from your experience in mandatory service besides like conflict resolution? Like, are there things today that you like call back on or think and reflect on from your time? That
what I consider is a difficult situation. It's just this is easy.
Like when you think about when you didn't eat for a week.
Yeah, for example, or when you have lack of physical comfort or sleep deprivation and overwhelming, complex or demanding tasks. I many times think back to that and say, you know what, I've done it worse. I've dealt with much more difficult things than this. Or, I think, I don't know if I told you this, but like I laugh when I see people run across the parking lot because they don't want to get wet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, like, you can come home to dry clothes.
I lived in a puddle.
Yeah, I lived in a puddle for a week, and then like it is miserable. I was like shivering for a whole week. This is nothing. So
gratitude.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is a mindfulness and gratitude.
How about you in your training? Did you have anything that you experienced now in your civil life from your? Did you guys go through boot training
Yeah, we went to boot camp. I would say like the attention to detail is the biggest thing they push in the Air Force because everybody's working on such technical things, especially the planes.
Yeah, and they fall out of the sky. It's not that everything is tightened up.
They want them to stay in the sky, and it's the same. They're teaching 18 to 20-year-olds how to do it, so they make it very simple, but they emphasize the points of of safety, of paying attention to what you're doing, and doing it right every time.
Yeah.
So that like meticulousness, I guess I kind of carry over. I think about things and like problem solving too.
Yeah.
Like the way I'd say my framework of my mind is definitely designed by them.
Yeah, you analyze. I mean, that's a lot of it. Actually, I think like engineering school has a lot of that. Like you got to have a certain way of problem solving things, and then you can, once you have that model, you can apply it to pretty much anything. It doesn't have to be an engineering challenge, but that mindset is something that also, obviously I carry forward from my academic training, but from a military training, I think it's all the hardships we had to go through and all the challenges, and say, you know what, if I can conquer that and overcome those things, I can do pretty much anything. And I actually didn't have that level of self-confidence before my army. I wish I had that to some extent, because then I had probably taken on even harder challenges. And I might have tried to go become like a paratrooper, or we call like the equivalent to the Marines. Where I knew some kids that went through it, or one kid in particular, and they had to do like a lot of underwater operations, and some of those were intentionally done in an environment that was they had to be mission focused, right? So they had sewer canals that they had to dive into and do things like you had to dive in, get out on the other side.
Oh wow, it's intense.
Yeah, so really like mind-blowing things, and what they do, the intent is to, and they also had a lot of the traditional, elite force sort of break down your spirit, break down and then they build you back up the way they want you to be, and you become sort of one robot, killing machine. Right?
Hive mind.
Yeah, and I mean, some people got damaged from that, like mentally, for the rest of their lives, because they were,
pushed a little too hard.
Yeah, and it had consequences on there, and so maybe it's not maybe a good thing I didn't, but I had a captain who came with that kind of background and applied, even though my unit wasn't supposed to be trained like that. He was like, you know what, you can only
Or training.
yeah, you can only bring this much. Or he said, Hedstrom, you just lost your backpack.
No, I didn't.
No, exactly. No, and he's taking it back and it's like, you don't have your sleeping bag, you don't have your kitchen, you only whatever you have on you is what you have for the rest of this exercise. I'm like, oh shit. So,
but overall, it was a good experience. A lot of fun,
absolutely,
right?
Yes. I had a lot of fun.
Do you learn English in school in Sweden?
Yeah, age 10.
So, how quickly is it hilarious that speed is fart in Swedish, and Swedish for speed is fart?
Yeah,
how can you say it? Can you say it? Speed in Swedish.
Oh, fart. Yeah. Yeah, it is hilarious. It is.
So when do you find that out in Sweden?
Oh, when you're about 10 or 11. And then you laugh about it. You laugh about it. We have similar idiosyncrasies between Swedish and German. So, for example, that I think are more fun, but so they have the word so öl in Swedish means beer.
Okay.
So if you want to go to the bar and want to order a beer, you say, "Can I få en öl?"
Oh,
öl. Yeah,
it's like ale.
Yeah, it's probably a Swedishification of ale. So in Germany, öl is oil, like motor oil or oil in general. So if you go to a bar there and ask for öl, they'll give you oil. Obviously, they don't have oil in the bar. They would look like, what? We also have so Vicks, the cough droppy,
okay.
or whatever. That's called the V is pronounced F in German, and so it becomes fix, and that's the same as fuck. So so fick in Swedish is the pre-word for example, ficklampa, which is really pocket lamp or flashlight in English.
Okay.
So we have ficklampa, we have fickbok, which is a little book that you put in your pocket or that fits in the pocket. We have all those, and they mean in German a fuck light or a fuck book or a fuck something, which is obviously very sort of disturbing that you have a special light to have sex or a special book that you write down your whatever. So we have and so there's a lot of fun stuff with that too, but there are some stupid things in English. Fart is obviously one of them.
It's too good. It's just very funny. Well, Peter, thank you for the cultural education.
You're welcome.
This was an excellent time.
Yeah.
And thank you very much. Have a nice day.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Jay.